She used 73,000 pounds of my money to hire a lawyer to sue me for more of my money. That's what Pranny did. That's the sentence I repeat to myself when I'm trying to make sense of what happened, though sense is probably the wrong word for it. I'm Melvin. I'm 67 years old. I practiced law in London for 38 years, and I got systematically destroyed by a 28-year-old paralegal who understood Thai family law better than I ever bothered to learn it. The joint account I opened for household expenses, the one I deposited 5,000 pounds into monthly like clockwork, was drained over 19 months to fund everything from her family's debts to the legal fees for a divorce case where she claimed I'd financially controlled and emotionally abused her. The lawyer she hired with my money got her awarded the Sukhumvit condo I'd purchased, monthly maintenance payments I couldn't afford, and a settlement that left me with less than a quarter of what I'd moved to Thailand with. I spent my career as a commercial solicitor. Contracts, corporate mergers, shareholder disputes, the kind of law that paid extremely well and required obsessive attention to detail. I was good at it, very good. I made partner at 41, handled multi-million pound transactions, never lost a major case in arbitration. My reputation was built on being meticulous, on catching what other lawyers missed, on protecting my clients from exposure they didn't see coming. The irony of what happened to me in Bangkok isn't subtle. It's the kind of irony that makes former colleagues who hear the story either laugh or wince, depending on how well they liked me. I married my first wife, Rebecca, in 1982. We had 3 decades together, 2 sons who are both barristers now working at good chambers in London. Rebecca developed early onset dementia in 2014. She was only 60. The progression was brutal and fast. Within 18 months, she didn't recognize me anymore. Within 3 years, she needed full-time residential care. I visited her every weekend at the facility in Hampstead until she died in November 2018. The marriage had effectively ended years before her death, but the grief was complicated. I mourned the person she'd been while caring for the shell of that person, and by the time she actually died, I felt numb more than sad. My sons encouraged me to retire after Rebecca's death. I was 64. I'd been working 70-hour weeks for 40 years, and the partners at my firm were happy to facilitate early retirement with a generous package. I took it. Sold the house in Islington that was too big and full of memories that hurt. Kept a small flat in Bloomsbury for UK visits, but decided I needed to live somewhere completely different, somewhere without associations to my old life. A barrister I'd worked with on several cases had relocated to Bangkok and kept telling me how much he loved it. Efficient city, low cost of living, excellent medical facilities, interesting expat community. He invited me to visit in March 2019. I spent 2 weeks in Bangkok on that first trip. Stayed at a hotel near Asok, explored the city with my barrister friend as a guide, met some of his expat social circle. What struck me most was the efficiency. Everything worked despite the city being chaotic. The BTS was clean and reliable. The infrastructure was modern in central areas. You could get anything delivered within an hour. The hospitals were genuinely world-class. It felt like a place where I could maintain a comfortable Western lifestyle at a fraction of London costs, while also experiencing something culturally different. I went back to London, organized my affairs, and moved to Bangkok permanently in June 2019. I rented a 2-bedroom condo in Asok initially, close to the BTS, surrounded by the shopping centers and restaurants and Western amenities that made the transition easier. The retirement visa process was straightforward for someone with my financial documentation. I had roughly 530,000 pounds in liquid assets after selling the London house and sorting Rebecca's estate. My law firm pension gave me about 4,000 pounds monthly. I could live extremely comfortably in Bangkok without touching the principal. Pranee worked at the property management office for my condo building. I met her in July 2019 when I had an issue with the air conditioning in my unit. She came up to coordinate with the maintenance team, spoke excellent English, was professional and efficient. 28 years old, studied law at Ramkhamhaeng University, worked as a paralegal at a Thai law firm that handled property disputes and family law cases. She'd taken the property management job as a side position because the paralegal salary alone wasn't enough to support her family obligations. Her family situation was genuinely difficult from what I understood initially. Father had died in a motorcycle accident when she was 17. Mother had health problems, diabetes, and hypertension, needed regular medication and clinic visits. Younger brother was at university studying engineering. Younger sister was finishing secondary school. Prani was the primary financial support for all of them. She sent most of her salary back to her family in Nakhon Sawan, kept only enough for basic expenses in Bangkok, lived with three other women in a small apartment in On Nut to minimize rent costs. We started having coffee occasionally after work. Nothing romantic at first, genuinely just conversation. I found her intelligent and practical. She asked good questions about English law when she learned my background, wanted to understand how contracts work differently in common law versus civil law systems. I enjoyed explaining things, felt intellectually engaged in a way I hadn't since retiring. She was interested in my career stories, asked about specific cases, seemed to value the experience and perspective I could offer. The shift to something personal happened gradually over several months. We had dinner together in September 2019. She invited me to visit a weekend market in Chatuchak, said it would be good for me to see Bangkok beyond the expat areas. We took day trips to Ayutthaya and Khao Yai. Nothing felt rushed or transactional. It felt like two people with different backgrounds developing genuine connection despite the age gap. The age gap bothered me significantly. 39 years. She was closer in age to my sons than to me, but Prani consistently dismissed this concern. She said age mattered less in Thai culture than in Western countries, that respect and stability were more important than whether someone was in their 20s or 60s. She said she'd dated Thai men her age and found them immature, financially irresponsible, uninterested in commitment or family obligations. She said I was different because I was established, thoughtful, serious about life, rather than treating everything as sonic. We became physically involved in November 2019. Again, she initiated more than I did. I'd been careful not to push for anything that might make her uncomfortable given our professional connection and age difference. But she made it clear she wanted the relationship to be romantic, that she saw me as a potential life partner, not just a mentor or friend figure. The physical relationship was good. Not earth-shattering, but warm and comfortable. More importantly, I felt valued and needed in a way I hadn't felt in years. Rebecca's illness had hollowed out our marriage long before she died. This felt like emotional restoration. Prani met my sons via video call in December 2019 when they came to Bangkok for a brief holiday visit. The meeting was awkward. My older son Richard was polite, but obviously skeptical. My younger son Christopher was more direct, asked Prani pointed questions about her intentions and her family situation. After the meeting, Richard told me privately that he thought I was being naive, that the relationship had obvious financial imbalances, that I should be extremely careful about mixing finances or making legal commitments. I told him he was being culturally insensitive and that Prani had never asked me for money. That last part was technically true at the time. Prani had never directly asked for money, but she'd mentioned her family's financial struggles often enough that the implication was clear. Her mother needed a medical procedure that cost 90,000 baht, and the public hospital wait was 6 months. Her brother's university fees were overdue. Her sister needed money for school uniforms and supplies. Each mention came with Prani looking stressed and worried, clearly carrying the weight of being the family's primary support. I started helping financially in January 2020. Small amounts initially, 20,000 baht for her mother's medical expenses, 15,000 baht for her brother's tuition, 10,000 baht for her sister's school costs. Praney was genuinely grateful each time, almost tearfully so. She said she'd pay me back when she could, though I told her not to worry about repayment, that I was in a position to help and wanted to ease her burden. The amounts were insignificant relative to my overall assets. What was 20,000 baht to me? Roughly 500 pounds. Nothing. But to her family, it was apparently life-changing. The joint account happened in March 2020. We'd been discussing Praney moving into my condo, rather than continuing to pay rent in Onnut for a place she barely used since she spent most nights with me anyway. She agreed, but said she felt uncomfortable living with me without contributing financially. I said her contribution could be managing household matters, coordinating with building management, handling domestic admin that I found tedious. She said that felt like being a maid rather than a partner, that she wanted to contribute financially to show we were equals. I suggested a joint account for household expenses. I'd deposit 5,000 pounds monthly, roughly 210,000 baht at the exchange rate then, and she'd use it for rent, utilities, groceries, household supplies, anything related to maintaining our shared domestic life. She'd have equal access to the account, could manage expenses as she saw fit, and this would make her feel less dependent. She loved this idea. Said it made her feel respected and trusted. We opened the account at Siam Commercial Bank in early March 2020. I deposited the first month's amount. She moved into my condo the following week. The pandemic hit properly in late March. Thailand went into lockdown. Praney's paralegal job shifted to remote work, and her property management position was paused since most building residents had left Bangkok. We were together constantly in the condo. At first, it was pleasant. She cooked Thai food, taught me basic language skills, organized the household efficiently. But gradually, I noticed money disappearing from the joint account faster than our household expenses should require. April 2020 showed withdrawals of 190,000 baht. I asked Pranee about it. She said groceries were expensive during lockdown, that she'd stocked up on supplies, that she'd bought better quality ingredients because we were eating at home exclusively. She said she'd also paid some building fees I'd forgotten about. I accepted this explanation because I wasn't tracking expenses carefully, and pandemic pricing was genuinely inflated. May was similar. 215,000 baht withdrawn. June was 220,000. I started checking the account statements more carefully. Many withdrawals were cash, no merchant information, just ATM withdrawals ranging from 15,000 to 30,000 baht at a time. When I asked about the cash withdrawals, Praney said many local markets and vendors didn't accept cards, that she was buying fresh produce and household items from smaller shops that required cash payment. The pandemic restrictions eased in June 2020. My expat friends started having socially distanced gatherings again. One friend, a British accountant named Richard, who'd been in Bangkok for 15 years, pulled me aside at a small dinner party and asked if I was being careful about my finances. He said he'd heard through mutual friends that I'd opened a joint account with a much younger Thai girlfriend, that this was typically a precursor to serious financial problems. He said almost every Western man he knew who'd opened joint accounts with Thai partners had been systematically drained. I got defensive. Told Richard he was stereotyping, that not every Thai woman was a gold digger, that Pranee was educated and employed and had never demanded anything from me. Richard said demanding wasn't how it worked, that the sophisticated ones never demanded. They just created situations where giving money seemed like the natural and generous thing to do. He said I should at minimum track the joint account expenses carefully and make sure I understood exactly where money was going. I did start tracking more carefully after that conversation. July 2020 showed 235,000 baht withdrawn. August was 240,000. September was 265,000. The amounts were creeping up. I asked Pranny for detailed accounting of expenses. She showed me receipts, though many were handwritten receipts from small vendors that could have been for anything. She said her mother needed more medication. Her brother needed a new laptop for online university classes. Her sister needed money for tutoring. She said Thai family obligations were complicated and that I needed to trust her judgment about what was necessary. The trust argument worked on me. I'd spent my career trusting clients to tell me the truth, trusting contracts to be honored, trusting systems and processes. The idea that I was being systematically deceived by someone I was living with, someone I was intimate with, felt paranoid. Praney seemed genuinely stressed when her family needed help. She cried when her mother had health scares. She showed me messages from her brother about university struggles. It all seemed real. October 2020 was when I bought the condo. We'd been living in my rental unit for 7 months. The lease was expiring, and I was deciding whether to renew or buy something. Pranee suggested buying made more financial sense than continuing to rent. She found listings for condos in Sukhumvit, helped me evaluate options, coordinated viewings with sellers. We found a two-bedroom unit near Phrom Phong Station, 90 square meters, fully furnished, asking price 13 million baht, about 310,000 pounds at the exchange rate then. Thai law prevents foreigners from owning land but allows condo ownership as long as the building's foreign ownership quota isn't exceeded. The purchase process required legal documentation showing the money came from overseas, proving foreign ownership rights. My lawyer, a Thai attorney named Wichai, who specialized in foreign property purchases, handled everything. The title deed listed me as sole owner. Pranee wasn't on any ownership documents because we weren't married, and mixing ownership rights without marriage would create potential legal complications. Pranee raised the marriage question in November 2020, not as a proposal exactly, but as a practical matter. She said if we were building a life together, if I'd bought a condo where we were living, if we were sharing finances through the joint account, then marriage would give her legal protections and social legitimacy. She said her family was conservative and uncomfortable with her living with a foreign man without marriage. She said marriage would also make visa renewals and financial arrangements simpler from a legal standpoint. I was hesitant. My divorce from Rebecca, technically still my wife when she died, had left me with complicated feelings about marriage as an institution. But Prenny's practical arguments made sense. We registered our marriage at the AMFO office in Bangkok in December 2020. It was a simple administrative process, required documents showing I was free to marry and had adequate income to support a spouse. We had no ceremony, just the legal registration. Pranee seemed happy. She changed her surname to mine on Thai documents, though she kept using her Thai name Pranee rather than adopting anything English. The financial dynamics shifted after marriage. The joint account withdrawals increased to 300,000 baht monthly by January 2021. When I questioned this, Pranee said we were married now, that Thai culture expected husbands to support wives' families, that her family obligations hadn't changed just because we'd formalized our relationship legally. She said I was being cheap and controlling by questioning every expense after I'd committed to marriage. The controlling accusation stung. I'd never thought of myself as controlling. Throughout my career, I'd been respectful of colleagues, supportive of junior solicitors, fair in negotiations. But Pranee started framing my questions about money as evidence of character flaws. She said I treated her like an employee rather than a wife. She said I didn't understand or respect Thai culture. She said Western men who moved to Thailand always thought they were superior and could dictate terms to Thai partners. February 2021 was 290,000 baht withdrawn from the joint account. March was 320,000. April was 350,000. I was depositing 210,000 monthly, which meant the account balance was going negative and drawing from the reserve I'd built up initially. By May 2021, the account had only 30,000 baht remaining, despite me having deposited well over 2 million baht total since opening it. I confronted Prani in May about the account being nearly empty. She said she'd used the money appropriately for household expenses and family obligations. I asked for detailed accounting. She said she wasn't my bookkeeper, that I was insulting her by demanding receipts like she was an employee being audited. She said if I didn't trust her, we had fundamental relationship problems. She started sleeping in the second bedroom, said she needed space to think about whether she could stay married to someone who treated her with such disrespect. This pattern continued through summer 2021. Prini was cold and distant. She'd go out frequently without telling me where, come back late, refuse to discuss her activities. The joint account stayed empty despite me continuing to deposit the monthly 5,000 pounds. The money vanished within days of each deposit. I checked the statements obsessively. Large cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payments to vendors that might have been legitimate or might have been complete fabrications. September 2021 was when my expat friend Richard suggested I hire a private investigator. He said Prani's behavior matched patterns he'd seen in multiple friends' relationships that had ended in severe financial exploitation. I resisted initially because hiring an investigator felt like admitting my marriage was a sham, but Richard was insistent. He gave me contact information for a Thai investigator who specialized in cases involving foreign Thai relationships. The investigator's name was Narong. He charged 50,000 baht up front, said he'd track Prani's movements and financial activities for 2 weeks. His report came back in early October. Prani had been meeting regularly with a Thai lawyer named Somchai who specialized in divorce cases involving foreign husbands and Thai wives. She'd visited his office 6 times over the 2 weeks Narong followed her. The investigator couldn't determine what they discussed, but the context was clear. She was preparing for divorce. The report also documented that Prani had been withdrawing cash from the joint account and immediately depositing it into a personal account at Bangkok Bank that I had no access to. She'd accumulated roughly 800,000 baht in this account over the past 6 months. The money I thought was going to household expenses and family obligations was actually being siphoned into her personal savings. I confronted her with the investigator's report on October 12th, 2021. She denied nothing. Said yes, she'd been consulting a divorce lawyer because I'd become impossible to live with. Said yes, she'd been saving money from the joint account because she needed financial security, given that I was emotionally abusive and financially controlling. She said the investigator report proved I was paranoid and didn't trust her, which validated her decision to seek divorce. I asked about the money she'd taken from the joint account. She said it was household money that she'd managed as she saw fit. I said household money shouldn't be going into her personal savings account. She said she'd earned that money by managing the household and supporting me, that Thai wives were entitled to compensation for domestic labor. She said if I tried to claim she'd stolen anything, she'd testify in court about how I'd monitored her movements, hired investigators to spy on her, created a climate of control and suspicion that made the marriage untenable. I consulted with my own Thai lawyer, Wichai, who'd handled the condo purchase. He said divorce cases involving foreign husbands and Thai wives were heavily weighted in the wife's favor under Thai family law. The court would likely view me as the party with superior financial resources and bargaining power. If Prani claimed emotional abuse or financial control, which were difficult to disprove, she could be awarded substantial assets and ongoing support. Wichai said my best strategy was negotiating a settlement directly with Prani to avoid courts entirely. I attempted negotiation. Offered Pranny £200,000 as a settlement to walk away from the marriage with no further claims. She refused. Said she was entitled to half the marital assets under Thai law, which would include the condo valued at roughly £310,000. I said the condo had been purchased before we were married and was in my name only. She said Thai courts might view it differently since we'd lived there as a married couple. Her lawyer Somchai sent me a formal letter in November 2021. It outlined Pranay's claims in the divorce case. She was seeking 50% ownership of the condo or equivalent cash value. She was seeking monthly maintenance payments of 60,000 baht, roughly £1,800, for a period of 5 years. She was claiming I'd engaged in financial abuse by restricting her access to money and monitoring her spending. The letter demanded I vacate the condo and cease all contact with Pranay except through legal representatives. I showed this letter to Wikai. He said Pranay's claims were aggressive but not unprecedented in Thai divorce courts. The maintenance payments were excessive given the brief duration of our marriage, but courts often awarded substantial payments when significant wealth disparities existed between parties. The condo claim was more complex because Thai family law did consider assets accumulated during marriage to be joint marital property even if legal title was held by one party. What made me physically ill was realizing that Pranay's legal fees for this divorce case, the fees she was paying Somchai to destroy me financially, were coming from the joint account I'd funded. Wichai estimated a contested divorce case of this complexity would cost at least 300,000 baht in legal fees. That money had come from the joint account, where I'd deposited £5,000 monthly for 19 months. I'd deposited roughly 2 million baht total. Probably a quarter of that had gone directly to paying the lawyer who was now suing me for half my remaining assets. The case proceeded through family court in early 2022. I hired additional legal representation, a firm that specialized in defending foreign men in Thai divorce cases. My legal fees ran to £170,000 over 6 months of proceedings. Pranay's side presented her as a victim of financial abuse, submitted testimony from her family about how I'd restricted her access to money, showed records of the joint account where my deposits were characterized as minimal support rather than generous provision. Her lawyer argued that £5,000 monthly was barely adequate for household expenses in Bangkok, that I'd forced her to live frugally while I maintained substantial assets overseas. My side presented the joint account statements showing her systematic withdrawals and transfers to personal accounts. We showed evidence that Pranay had been employed throughout most of our relationship and had her own income. We documented that the condo was purchased before marriage and legally titled solely in my name. We argued that her claims of financial abuse were fabricated to strengthen her divorce settlement position. The court proceedings were conducted in Thai. I understood perhaps one word in 20 despite having studied basic Thai during my 3 years in Bangkok. I sat through sessions watching judges and lawyers argue about my life in a language I couldn't follow, while a translator provided summaries that felt inadequate. Pranay presented as demure and distressed, testified through tears about how I'd made her feel controlled and trapped. I presented as a wealthy foreign man trying to avoid financial obligations to his younger Thai wife. Regardless of facts, the optics were terrible. The judgment came in July 2022. The court awarded Pranay 25% ownership stake in the condo, equivalent to roughly £77,000 in value. I was ordered to pay her monthly maintenance of 35,000 baht, roughly £1,000, for 3 years. The court rejected her emotional abuse claims as unsubstantiated, but found that I'd failed to adequately support her during the marriage, despite having substantial financial resources. The court characterized the joint account as my attempt to control spending rather than generous provision. The financial impact was devastating. I'd spent £170,000 on legal fees. I owed Pranny £77,000 for her condo stake. I owed her £36,000 total in maintenance payments over 3 years. Add in the roughly £73,000 I'd deposited into the joint account over 19 months, and my total loss was approximately £356,000. More than two-thirds of my liquid assets gone. I sold the condo in August 2022 to settle the divorce judgment. The sale price was 12.8 million baht, slightly less than I'd paid, because the Bangkok condo market had softened. After paying Pranny her 25% and covering remaining legal costs, I had about £190,000 remaining in accessible assets. My pension still provided £4,000 monthly, but that was barely enough to cover living expenses in Bangkok and the maintenance payments to Pranny. I left Thailand in September 2022, returned to London, moved into a small flat in Croydon that I'm renting at £1,400 monthly. At 67 years old, I have less than £200,000 in total assets, a pension that covers basic living expenses with nothing left over, and no realistic way to rebuild wealth. I'm working part-time at a legal aid clinic, doing volunteer work that keeps me occupied and feels more purposeful than retirement, though it pays nothing. My lifestyle has contracted to something I would have found unimaginable 5 years ago. Pranee is still in Bangkok. I check her social media occasionally, though I know I shouldn't. She's with someone new, another Western man, looks to be in his 50s, appears wealthy based on the restaurants and hotels featured in their photos together. She's still using my surname on legal documents according to the maintenance payment records my lawyer receives. The payments go directly from my pension into a Thai bank account every month like clockwork. I'll be paying her until July 2025. My sons have been supportive, but there's an undercurrent of frustration in their sympathy. Richard said I'd ignored obvious warning signs and paid the price. Christopher said hiring a private investigator was evidence I'd known something was wrong, but kept hoping it wasn't. They're both right. I knew the joint account withdrawals were excessive. I knew Pranee's family emergencies were suspiciously frequent and expensive. I knew that a 28-year-old woman probably wasn't with me for my sparkling personality and physical attractiveness. But knowing and acting on knowledge are different things. The lesson everyone tells me I should have learned is about protecting assets in cross-border relationships with significant age and wealth gaps. Keep finances separate. Don't open joint accounts. Don't purchase property without ironclad prenuptial agreements. Don't believe that legal knowledge in one jurisdiction translates to another. I knew all these things intellectually. I'd advised corporate clients on cross-border mergers with exactly this kind of careful attention to jurisdictional differences. I just didn't apply any of that discipline to my personal life because I wanted to believe the relationship was genuine. The harder lesson, the one I'm still processing, is about control and how it blinds you. I thought I was in control throughout the relationship with Pranee. I was the older party, the wealthier party, the one with legal expertise and life experience. I thought I was making measured decisions about financial support based on clear assessment of circumstances. What I didn't see was that believing I was in control made me vulnerable to someone who understood how to make me feel that way while actually controlling everything. Pranee never demanded money directly. She created situations where offering money seemed generous and appropriate. She never pushed me toward marriage. She framed it as practical and logical. She never threatened divorce explicitly. She just made staying in the relationship increasingly conditional on me, continuing to fund her activities without question. At every stage, I felt like I was making autonomous decisions. In retrospect, I was following a script she'd written, based on patterns she'd probably seen in her paralegal work at a law firm specializing in foreigner divorces. The ultimate irony is that Pranny used my money to hire the lawyer who destroyed me, and I never saw it coming because I'd structured the joint account to make her feel empowered and trusted. Every pound I deposited into that account, thinking I was being a generous husband, became ammunition she could use to claim I'd been controlling me. The court viewed my monitoring of expenses as evidence of financial abuse rather than reasonable oversight of jointly held funds. Thai family law, which I'd never properly studied despite spending my career in English law, treated the power dynamics of our relationship exactly opposite to how I'd perceived them. I'm 67 now. I have roughly 15 to 20 years remaining statistically. Those years will be lived in financial constraint, paying maintenance to someone who systematically exploited me while I believed I was building a genuine partnership. I don't date anymore. The idea of trusting anyone with access to my remaining assets is laughable. I'm fortunate my sons are successful and don't need financial help from me because I have nothing to give them. The inheritance I'd planned to leave has been redirected to a Thai woman who spent 19 months extracting everything she could before executing a divorce strategy she'd probably been planning from the beginning. If you're a Western man considering a relationship with someone significantly younger in Thailand or anywhere in Southeast Asia, here's what you need to understand. The legal systems favor local nationals over foreigners in domestic disputes. The cultural contexts around money and family obligations are different and easily exploited. Your professional expertise and life experience don't translate to protection when you're emotionally invested in believing someone cares about you for reasons beyond resources. The fact that someone hasn't directly demanded money doesn't mean they aren't systematically extracting it. And once you've opened joint accounts or married or purchased property that becomes entangled in family law, you've created vulnerabilities that can be weaponized against you. I practiced law for 38 years. I helped clients navigate complex international transactions, protected them from contractual exposure, advised them on risk management across jurisdictions. None of that protected me from being financially destroyed by someone who understood that my need to feel generous and trusted would override my professional instincts about protecting assets. That's the real lesson. Intelligence and expertise are worthless when you want to believe something badly enough to ignore evidence contradicting it. She hired a lawyer to sue me using my own money. That sentence is my reality now. The joint account I opened to make her feel equal became the funding mechanism for my own destruction. The marriage I entered to demonstrate commitment became the legal framework that gave her claims against my assets. The support I provided, thinking I was helping her family, became evidence of my obligation to continue supporting her indefinitely. And I did all of it voluntarily because I thought I was making rational, measured decisions based on clear assessment of a situation I understood and controlled. I understood nothing. I controlled nothing. And now I'm 67 years old, living in Croydon, paying maintenance to someone who probably never saw me as anything beyond a funding source with legal complications attached. That's what 3 years in Bangkok and one marriage to someone 39 years younger cost me. £356,000, most of my retirement assets, and whatever remained of my belief that professional competence translates to personal wisdom.